Okay, so let's start adding a little bit of detail to this. So first of all, like I did with the toes, I want to do that with these fingers. So I'm going to add, first I'm going to create 2 arcs. And it roughly just divides the finger into thirds. And then I'm going to put some circles, which represent the knuckles. There. And we probably could do the same thing for the thumb. So I'm just going to erase that and then put it back in. So start with a line and then just divide it. Put in 2 knuckles. All right. So now we have that. At the end of the tail, I should probably shrink it and then include a little bit at the end of the tail as well, of detail, I mean. So I'm gonna create another diamond shape. So here we really have 3 diamonds. We have big one for the body, and then small one for the head, and a decent sized one for the tail. Now, again, you can customize these however you want because dragons don't really exist. So you can really be, you know, go nuts and create all sorts of designs. Just gonna erase this finger because I wasn't happy with it. Quickly put it in again. And when you're dealing with simple shapes like these, it's very easy to, you know, erase things, change the position of things, because these are just lines, right? There's no detail here. And that's really one of the big keys, I think, is to understand that when you start a drawing, keep things loose, keep things rough, and then add detail. So I'm going to start with the body. Now, I mentioned about this body being a diamond. Now, from the side view, it's actually like a diamond as well. So if this was a side view, it would look like this. And from a 3/4 view, that will probably explain it better. Say we have this. This is the middle, and it's going back in space and coming forward. So it would look something like this from a 3/4 view. Hope that makes sense. So let's say we're looking at this dragon and we're looking kind of up at him. So I'm going to first put a center line in the middle. Now I kind of have that here already, but I'm just going to define it because this dragon's turning to face that way. So the center line is going to be on the side in the side view. It's going to be here, but this is a front view. So I'm just going to create a line to separate that, you know, this is turned. So if it's an arrow, it's kind of doing that. And I'm going to add a bit of detail to this. So I'm adding some, really they just look like V's. Triangles, again, you could think of it that way. And then I'm going to change the direction up top. And I'm going to follow the form, the way this turns. So you noticed first my lines were like this, and they started turning like that. that's going to give us our form for the dragon's neck and his body. Now I'm going to put in the wings, but first just going to connect the hips. So we had a line with a triangle for the hips. We had the legs coming out like that. And now I'm just attaching that to the body. So we had that big triangle for the body, and I'm going to just, attach it like so. And now I'm going to do the webbing of the wings. So just gonna basically connect these. And then here's the elbow, remember? And then it's got this part coming out. So I'm going to connect the wing way up to this part. And then it's going to actually go behind a little bit. Now, with this, you can change how this goes as well. You could connect this, all the way to the tail if you wanted. You could keep it closer to the body if you want as well. It doesn't really matter. You could even not have this and just go all the way to maybe the armpit. It's really up to you. I kind of like the idea that the wing goes over the back as well. So in a side view, if we have the body here and we have the shoulder coming out like this, and this is the arm, then the wing is actually going to connect to the back. And this is the neck, and this is the head. And then maybe there's things on the back, so it actually connects back there. But again, it's really personal preference. I'm just showing you one approach. Okay, so now that we have, the skeleton down, I'm gonna fatten up my brush a little bit so you can see it a bit easier. Maybe I'll reduce the opacity of this just a little bit. And I'm just gonna go and start detailing. So I'm really thinking of this like human anatomy. So if you're familiar with human anatomy, it shouldn't be too hard. I'm just, adjusting it to fit. So I'm thinking of, this is an arm, so it's got a deltoid. I'm thinking it's going to be a bit skinny. There's going to be somewhat of like a chest here, but then understanding that this part is coming out forward like this. And instead of having a human chest where you have, pec muscles and then the ribs, it's just going to be more like V shapes, and it's still similar to a human though. You can think of it that way. And then this elbow area. Now we have the forearm area. And thinking of it, at least for me, like a human, it really allows me to be able to, in my mind, manipulate this form much easier. So for instance, if I think that, okay, this wing here, if this isn't pointing up this direction, maybe it's pointing down, then I just have to think of it like a human. So what would happen? Well, if this is pointing down, then this elbow part's going to come out here, and then this forearm part is going to be pointing down, and then you have the thumb on top here, and the other fingers coming out like that, and then you'd get this kind of thing happening where This connects to this, and then this connects back here. And so you can get, you know, pretty complicated poses done pretty simply, because you don't have to worry about anything that's outside of, you know, human anatomy really. Okay, so now here when we get to the thumb, what I'm going to do is, this actually isn't connected to the web part. It's just like a claw. But I'm going to just go around those circles. And I can do the same thing for the fingers. And make sure that this is fairly thin, because the bones are going to be pretty thin and delicate. And again, if you want a good reference, just look at bats. It's very similar to this, and really I'm just stealing the anatomy from a bat. And here at the end we can put claws if you want. And you don't have to be too perfect, because that's one of the benefits of doing things that don't exist. Even when you're doing animals, you can get away with a lot that you can't get away with when drawing humans. And that's one of the reasons why people will say humans are the hardest thing to draw. It's not really that they're the most complicated thing to draw. I would imagine that, you know, I don't know, an octopus is more complicated maybe, or I don't know. There's probably much more complicated things. It's just that we're so familiar with humans and human anatomy and human proportions that there's very little room for error. Speaking of which, I noticed that this knuckle is probably up here on this. So I'm just gonna fix my drawing a little bit in terms of the position of these, and maybe just fix that a little bit. And now I'm gonna put in those fingers. And this is a pretty stiff pose. I'll show you after how to create more dynamic poses. And some claws at the end. And also, this is, you know, just the second stage. So I'm sort of detailing it a little bit, but I don't consider this really adding detail, because you can really go to town with all the details with scales and bumps and ridges and things all over the place. Okay, so now we have the wings, some of that webbing. And this V pattern is going to continue down into the tail. And like the head, how it went from the center and then it turned to the side, I'm going to do the same thing with the tail, so that this area is in a side view and this is facing forward. And just get the legs in. Now what I've done here is just created where the sartorius muscle would be. And I'm altering the human anatomy just a little bit so that it connects just a little bit different than a human, but not much. And then here's where the knee would be, and it goes back in space. And I'll put that little claw at the end of the heel. And I hope it's not too confusing when I say things like, you know, heel and knee, because I understand how different this looks than a human, but really that's the way I go about thinking of it, and I feel like that is what makes it so much more manageable, so much easier to draw. So now when we get to the feet, I started with a line and then a circle and had those 3 toes. I'm just connecting this back heel to the end of that. So if the heel's back here, connecting that to this bigger oval. And then same thing with the fingers. Just going to go around those knuckles. Add a claw at the end. And here it's up to you whether you want to keep the toes separate or if you want to add the webbing as well. That's really, you know, everything it's a personal preference. So I'm just going to connect that again. I'm choosing in this one to leave it separate. And there you have the dragon's feet and the tail. And yes, I'm purposely not doing the head just to create suspense. Maybe I'll deal with the head in its own part. So we get the tail, and then we have this diamond shape, and because this is a side view here in the tail, because it's, you know, turned, have to reposition my tail, so maybe you don't see too much of that diamond quality, but it is there. And the neck's pretty straightforward. Continue with this shape. Notice how I changed the direction of the V's because we're looking up. And in the next part, I'll deal with the head.